All right, let's get started. So thanks for coming in closer. I really want this to be a little bit more working, much more working than talking, although I love talking. So how many of you are in this situation? You share responsibility with somebody else to get something done, but you're not in charge of them and they're not in charge of you. However, what you get done, your productivity, your performance, your reputation, your credibility, ultimately your paycheck depends on what you do together. How many of you are in that situation? Anybody not in that situation? Because if you're not, there won't be anything here for you. So you've probably heard me ask you this before. If you've been in my sessions, I've been asking this question for 25-ish years, and that is, how do I behave in an environment of shared responsibility when I'm not in charge of them and they're not in charge of me? But I see myself as a performer, and I want to reap the rewards. So I've spent most of that time studying the mind's perceptions of cause and effect, about how we process thoughts, about why things happen the way they do. And that's led to the research on what's called the responsibility process, which has a fairly big component in what we're doing today. So you know me as the responsibility process guy. And if you haven't been introduced to the responsibility process, we'll try and do that today. All right, let's solve this problem. I might have to move the computer down where I can reach it. We can solve this. So I've been an organizational change and leadership consultant for around 30 years. And early in my career, I found that I spent a tremendous amount of time helping people cope. And still, the number one thing that I hear in organizations is, it's insane around here. Anybody in this room hear that on a daily basis? It's insane around here. Anybody say it? All right. Yeah, so, it occurred to me that every day I run into people who are smart and ambitious and educated and high performers and high income wage earners, and yet they feel out of control, right? They live in lives and jobs that they don't know how they got there, and they don't know how to change it and think they can't change it. And so that's the world that I live in, is helping anybody who wants to figure out how to, number one, change your own life, do so, because most of us are in some way change agents. We are supposed to be bringing change to others, yet most of us have this kind of experience where we don't know how to change really important patterns in our own lives. And this has to do with this framework that I'm going to share with you, which is a framework I've used for a long time, and I've taught thousands, tens of thousands of technical professionals and engineers and scientists and developers and managers around the world that they can build any team, anytime, if they're willing to do what it takes. Hello, I'm Christopher Avery, and probably should say here that I'm in the middle of a rebranding of our company. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that after 28 years. But I brought a few copies of 2 books with me. So what we're talking about today is in this book, Teamwork is an Individual Skill. And my newer book is on the responsibility process itself, which is the responsibility process is in both books. And you have a chance to leave here with one of those books today. In fact, you have many chances, and I'll tell you how. So about the teamwork book, Fortune magazine said it's the only book on teamwork you need to read. And I was really fortunate to get that gracious statement from them. And the rebranding is this. For 28 years, my company has been called PartnerWorks. And last year I acquired responsibility.com, the URL. And as of January, we changed the company name to the Responsibility Company. and soon you're going to see a new website at responsibility.com. And there's a surprise gift for you at responsibility.com if you'd like. And if you actually share your email with me later today, I will have a random drawing by my team, and we'll give 6 books to 6 people who have accepted one of these gifts that I'm going to offer you today. So, in terms of how many of you would like to be able to build any team anytime? That be worthwhile to you? No matter what your position is, whether you're a leader, a member, a developer, a consultant to the team, doesn't matter, right? So that's the promise, and there's a 5-step process that a lot of people have found to be really magical, and it's just 5 conversations. And the 5 conversations are based on the science of cohesion, what brings people together. And they're ordered pretty much in the order of what makes the biggest difference. So if you just have enough time to have one conversation, have the first one. But I want to start with step 0. So step 0 says first you want to believe that you deserve and can be on a great team. So, and I've found most people are not interested or willing to or aware of this step. So I did an assessment of a big failed program at a top engineering firm a number of years ago. And this is a firm that was known for hiring the top 10% of engineers from the top 10% of engineering colleges in the world. So that was what they thought was their secret to success, was hire the best of the best. And they had this big failed program, and I interviewed 100 engineers, and I asked all of them to what do you attribute your participation in this failed program? And the number 1 response I got was, I guess I got put on a bad team. And I was trying to make sense of that, and a week later I woke up in the middle of the night and thought to myself, oh my goodness, right? Smart, ambitious, well-paid, well-educated people at work think that they're not in charge of their own relationships at work. They think that the quality of their relationships at work is up to somebody else, and that somebody else has to make sure that they're on a good team. And that eventually ended up being my first career and led to this book called Teamwork is an Individual Skill, Getting Your Work Done When Sharing Responsibility. So over the years, what I've learned is that step 0 is to first take 100% responsibility for the quality of every relationship at work. That's kind of a tall order. But what the responsibility process says, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it, is that we are creating our own experiences, even if we think that we're not. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But the steps are to, number 1, be deserving of being on a great team. So do a little self-examination and say, am I the type of person that other people would want to team with? Right? Do I show up as a teammate and a collaborator? Or there's some things that I should change so that I deserve to be on a great team. And then what you find out is when you deserve to be on a great team, then you can actually up your demandingness, your internal expectation of demanding to be on a great team. And then when you demand to be on a great team, then you learn what it takes, what conversations are required in order to come together as a team. So this is the natural psychological process that happens when you start investing in it. And it can happen as rapidly or as slowly as you like. So how many of you have not been introduced to the responsibility process? How many have not been introduced to the responsibility process? Okay, so there's a whole bunch of videos online. Just Google my name and the word responsibility or responsibility process, and you'll find videos from 7 minutes to an hour and a half. And I highly recommend that you plan some time with yourself and go through one of those deep explanations. I'm just going to give you a tiny summary here. Every time something goes wrong, it triggers this pattern in your mind, which we've come to call the responsibility process. When I say every time something goes wrong, how many of you have had some little annoyance or frustration or upset already today? Stuff not working, traffic in your way, coffee spilled down your lap, technology not working, text from the boss wanting you to bail out of the conference and come back to work. All right. Anybody? How many of you have had 5 or 10 of those already today? Things going wrong. So the psychology shows that every time something goes wrong, we're in motion towards a goal because we're inspired, goal-oriented, motivated people. And we get stopped, and so we have this force field where we're stuck, and we even say to each other when we have problems, I'm stuck. So all true problems are emotional in their basis. They're not just logical. We say I'm stuck, and the moment that happens, no matter how small, it triggers this pattern in our minds that we use for processing thoughts about cause and effect. And we enter this model at the bottom, so you're programmed to cope by your mind giving you somebody to blame. And so our first thought is it's her fault, that darn president, or whatever. And usually we blame somebody who's in our favorites list, right? So, we can't find our car keys and we say, honey, did you see, right, my keys? And we do it with just a little bit of accusation, like they did something with our keys, right? And if it's in my house, they come back and say, yes, dear, it's right where you laid it down yesterday when you came in. And if we don't buy the blame, and we've been taught that we shouldn't blame, then we actually stop coping at that mental state. This is a mental state with its own logic. And we graduate to justify, which is where we have lots and lots of stories about our life and why we're in this situation and why there's nothing we can do. And it's because of the economy or the weather or the process or the bureaucracy or the budget or whatever. And so we have lots of story that we can tell that makes it just. So that's called justifying. And if we don't buy that answer, if we decide that we're not going to buy our story about the circumstances, then we graduate to blaming ourselves. And so we experience this as guilt. Usually I call it shame. I'm the dummy, I'm the dolt, it's my fault, blame me, I screwed up, I should know better. And if we buy this, and many of us are taught to buy this answer because it's reinforced in our society calls it taking responsibility, by the way, then we get stuck here, and this has deep prominence in our society. And if we decide to stop beating ourselves up for being human, because all humans make mistakes and all humans beat themselves up when they make mistakes, so all these things are normal, then we graduate to a mental state called obligation, which is the other definition of responsibility, which is you have to. Right? It's your responsibility, you have no choice, you have to do it. So obligation is the mental state of have to, don't want to. Have to, don't want to. How many of you have really stupid stuff you have to do? Stupid meeting you have to go to. If your boss is here, you don't have to raise your hand. Right? Stupid paperwork, stupid other stuff. Horrible, valueless, boring, costly, no value, have to do it. The only reason you do it is because you have to. So the psychology of obligation is feeling trapped, it's feeling burdened, feeling like you have no choice. And again, our societies reward us for this. Our societies tell us, oh, good boy, you're taking responsibility for doing what you're supposed to do, even if you despise it. And what we've learned is that in shame and obligation in this green, that's where you and I as professionals live, because we've been taught to be good people, and we want to be good people. And we've been reinforced for these two mental states, and so we spend a tremendous amount of time operating in these mental states. The issue is that below the line is all coping. We're spending all of our mental energy coping with what we don't want, coping with what we don't want to experience. And back to that slide of the guy going nuts, we end up thinking that this is the way it is, that in order to be a successful person in today's world, we have to put up with a tremendous amount of crap that we don't want. And I'm here to tell you it's not true. It doesn't have to be that way. So organizationally, in my culture change work, the issue here has to do with actually getting results. And what we know is that in the mental state of blame and justify, we produce no results. So we can check that empirically right now. How many of you have been involved in a problem-solving initiative in your workplace where you met with other people for weeks or months repeatedly about this problem, and the conversation never rose above blame and justify? How many of you have been in one of those situations? Conflict resolution, right? And so you collaborated with them to spend millions of dollars of your company's money and produced what results? None, right? So we have a tremendous amount of evidence of spending time with each other in coping states of blame and justify, spending money, producing no results. What if you had a language? What if you had a system for getting past that, for talking to others in a way that said, can we park that and move on? Maybe we could move on to feeling bad instead, right? So in shame and obligation, we get unsatisfying results, and that's where most of us live in most of our teams and organizations. And only in the mental state of responsibility do we get results that matter, both in terms of the product of your work as well as the humanity of your work. So to go back to the former slide, responsibility is a feeling state of freedom, choice, and power. It's a place where you are clear-headed and you're feeling good. You can experience joy and peace of mind, and you know that you are bigger than any problem. You know that you're not going to stay stuck for long in anything that you're in, and it's just another mental state like the other mental states, and it's available to you all the time. And every time you've grown or developed in your life, every time you've had an aha or an insight and felt that release of freedom, you've gone from below the line to above the line, so it's natural. And my job is just to help you learn how to do it at will, to be smarter at will. So that's the work on the responsibility process. And my second invitation for you is to download a copy of this poster. And on the back of the poster is a summary of everything that I just said about it. And you can download the poster at ChristopherAvery.com/poster, and you'll be entered to win one of the books this afternoon. So after you've decided that you're going to take 100% responsibility for being on a great team, then what I've learned is that the single biggest predictor of people coming together as a team is to have shared clarity about what you're a team to do. Isn't that simple? So on the back of your handout, there's a little assessment. So think about one of your teams. And on the first row, it says a clear task. The team enjoys shared understanding of its purpose and contribution to the organization. So assess your team on how you're doing on that first one. In other words, if you went and interviewed, or if I went and interviewed each of your teammates and said, what is this team a team to do? Would I get pretty much the same exact answer from each person, or would I not? So if I'd get pretty much the same answer, give yourself a 5, strongly agree. If I would get many different answers, or I don't know, right, a low answer, strongly disagree. Let me illustrate this for you. Can I have a volunteer? I'm not going to make fun of you. Somebody help me out? Come on up. Thank you.
Am I supposed to sit in a chair?
I'm Christopher.
Alexis.
Alexis, please sit. So, Alexis, have you ever rowed a boat?
Yes.
Okay, good. So let's imagine we're in a kind of an interesting boat where we're side by side. Each of us has an oar.
Okay.
And so we're both rowing, right?
I haven't done a rowboat.
Now notice what I said about the first step, and notice I said we're both in a boat, right, rowing side by side. How quick did it take Alexis to get entrained with me? Right? Did she start rowing a different direction or a different rhythm or something? No, right with me. Pretty cool. Now, imagine that we are at a lake and we get about a mile out in the lake, and Alexis notices that right next to my right foot there's a little gusher of water coming into our boat. Do you think that she is going to pull her phone out and call her best friend, take some pictures, and say, ha ha ha, Christopher's side of the boat is sinking? Right? You think she's going to do that?
They're looking at me and they're thinking yes.
Not a chance. Not a chance. I don't even know Alexis, and I know that if we were in that situation, she wouldn't do that. Why? She is literally in the same boat, which means we have what's called shared fate, right? So stay right here for a second because I'm going to come back to this. So in science, this is called interdependence. And in work, we have three types of interdependence. We have positive interdependence, negative interdependence, and independence, which would be zero interdependence. In positive interdependence, it means that you and they feel. This is about feeling. This is not about structure or pay or rewards. In positive interdependence, you and they feel that when you see the others working hard, you feel like they're making your job easier and you want to match them. All right? Positive interdependence. Negative interdependence is when the harder they work, the harder it makes your job. So a lot of companies like to build in competitiveness by building in negative interdependence. So how many of you are in situations where you have colleagues that the more successful they are, the harder it makes your work? Anybody? Right. Hopefully not, but I've seen lots of situations that are set up that way. And then independence is what people have traditionally asked for, and that is, can I just have an individual contributor role where I don't have to collaborate with anybody, I can just sit at my monitor and receive work and do my specialization and send it on. And how many jobs like that are available these days? Not many. So when we are literally in the same boat together, we immediately have the feeling of positive interdependence. In other words, we have shared fate, we rely on each other to get to where we're going. Now, let's say Alexis and I both had our own little rowing sculls, right? And we were out having fun, rowing around by ourselves, right? And now she sees my skull starting to sink. Now, again, I don't even know Alexis. What's the likelihood now she might get her phone out and take some pictures and post them on the internet, huh? Is it greater? Yeah, because we are interdependent, right? Thank you so much
No problem.
for helping to illustrate this. So the question is, how can you have a conversation with the people that you rely on? How can you have a conversation with them to get to this sense of being in the same boat together? And I can offer you a conversation starter. I have found this conversation starter to work amazingly well with teams all over the world of all size. I use it with executive teams. I use it with project teams. And that's the question is, what must we do together that is bigger than any of us, requires all of us, and none of us can claim individual victory without it? So I actually call this a spec. This is my specification for shared task. If you get everybody on your team to sit around a table for 20 minutes and have this conversation until they're looking at each other going, yeah, that's it. That's what we're a team to do. This is not about coming up with a highfalutin goal. This is not about generating a vision. This is not about creating a purpose or a mission statement. This is just answering the question, why are we a team? All right, so team exists for one reason, and that's because the task is bigger than individuals. So let's answer the question, why do we exist as a team? And then people start realizing that they rely on each other in order to get this thing done. And the emotional part, the feeling state, the psychology can shift towards this notion of positive interdependence. If I only had the luxury of having one conversation in a relationship to build a better relationship, it would be this one, right? Why are we a pair? Why are we collaborating? Why are we a team? What is it that we must do that's bigger than each of us, requires all of us, and none of us can claim individual victory without it? So, given that explanation, do you want to alter your answer on row 1? Right, thinking about your team and where you would assess them on the team enjoys shared understanding of its purpose and contribution to the organization. Comments, insights? Anybody learn anything about your team or yourself so far? Questions? Yes? Real loud. Stand up and real loud, please.
When you mentioned about positive interdependence, what are the ways you could make others feel? Like, is there any kind of exercise you could do? Is that, I know sometimes people see like, okay, they are working harder because they want to get their stuff done. How do you make everyone feel part of that? It's their role, it's not mine. If I do better, I will look good. Or if she does it, if she's going to get the name or she's going to move forward, how do we make everyone go together?
Thank you. What's your name?
Kavamani.
Pardon?
Kavamani.
Kavamani. Thank you, Kavamani. So if you didn't hear the question, it was, are there some exercises or some help to have this conversation to get people to feel like they're in this situation with you? Because they may have competitive interests, right? So I would say, number one, it helps if you're actually on the same team and fully dedicated, right? So if you're just in a department or people with the same specialty in a function, that's not necessarily a team. So the first conversation would be, what could make us a team? Right? So in thinking about building teams, my experience is that project teams are the easiest to build, and it's because they fit the classic laboratory scientific definition of a team, which is a beginning and an end and a shared deliverable or shared goal. The hardest team to build is an executive team, and the reason is that usually in an executive team, they design the teams so that each executive has their own fiefdom, and they actually don't have a shared task, right? And they compete for budget and they compete for attention and everything else. So when I deal with teams, executive teams that say we really want to be a team, this is the first conversation. And the way I approach this conversation is why? Why do you want to be a team? And what do you want to be a team to do? And what would you want to do as a team that could be more important to each of you than your individual assignment? And let's have that conversation. And when we have that conversation, then you'll be well on your way to being a true team. So that's my first thought about your situation, is check some of those things. And then my second thought is actually a professor right here from Ohio State many years ago wrote a little paper that had a profound impact on me, and that is that he said the most scarce resource in any team or organization is the attention of the members. So members' attention is your most scarce resource. And when you're asking me that question about how can I help you, help them feel that, that's what comes to mind, right? Is what they're telling you is that their attention is drawn to other places. So then I want to do some thinking about what we're doing together that's going to capture their attention and figure out how to talk about that. And sometimes the question is, what could we turn this into, right? I realize that you're on 4 different teams and, I'm trying to get your attention on this one. And so the conversation I want to have with you is what could actually be of interest here. Treat them as a real person with real interests, right? So I'm not trying to change them. I'm just simply trying to get a share of attention from them. Okay. So the second thing that I would do to build any team anytime is I would start surfacing the motivation of the members. So I use surface as a verb here. I use surface as the way a submarine captain gives an order to surface, right? So there's something implied here, which is where do most of us keep our real motivation most of the time? I heard something. Where do most of us keep our real motivation most of the time? Yeah, to ourselves, right, below the surface. Most of us do not wear our motivations on our sleeves, as they say. And organizationally, there's good reason for that, because the organization goes out of its way to define what should motivate you. And you could list it. Money, title, reward, right, etc. And when I started studying how to help people learn how to build teams, the number one fear that I got from people, especially those who were not in management roles, was I have no carrots and sticks. I can't make people pay attention, right? I can't control people's motivation. And my answer is, that's really good news. And it's really good news because carrot and stick motivation gets you average behavior, right? It gets you hygiene behavior. It's what people show up for. But it doesn't produce high performance. High performance is produced voluntarily, and that comes from the stuff that we wear beneath our sleeves, the stuff that's deeper in our heart, that we're hoping to find, and sometimes don't, or often don't at work. So the step 2 is I start having conversation with team members about what's in it for you to work with me on this project this time. And let me stipulate that. What's in it for you beyond a paycheck? And normally people will give you a socially acceptable answer the first time. Oh, I don't know, I get to do something interesting, or I get to help the team. Right? And here's the secret. Take that answer and say thank you, and then say, and when you get to do something interesting, or when you get to help the team, what does that do for you? Right? So you're drilling down a little beneath the surface here in a polite way. Let me see if I have, yeah, here's the probe a little bit deeper. And see what you can uncover. So I can actually demonstrate this for you. Would you like to see a demonstration? I think that I can uncover someone's energy. I would call it intrinsic motivation, but true energy. I think that I can uncover that for almost anybody really rapidly. And you can too, if you're willing to do it. Would you like to see? Cool. Dave, I know you a little bit. You know me a little bit. Can I interview you? Okay. So we'll both talk into this microphone. So Dave West. Oh, you've got one more. Great.
Thanks.
Right. And you'll be doing a brilliant talk.
I'll be doing a
closing
yes.
keynote.
Brilliant is obviously there.
Yeah, brilliant closing keynote later today. So
we'll see.
Thank you, Dave, for doing this. So Dave, our job here today is to help each other learn at this conference. Would that be a shared task?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you go to conferences to help each other learn, how does that serve you?
I learn things from others and build relationships and, enjoy it.
Cool.
It's a happy experience, right?
Yes, absolutely. And when you learn things from others and build relationships and have this happy experience, how does it serve you? How do you win?
So I guess it makes me, how do I win? Well, obviously I do a lot of talks, I do a lot of presentations around the world, and I get to use those examples, I get to pull on those experiences to make my talks better. I mean, ultimately it's all about me, but, what's that, a Buddhist tenet, right? and because of the things that I learn and the people that I meet.
Okay, so I want to follow that because you started to say I feel, and then you said ultimately it's all about me, and this is where I really want to go. So I'm going to probe one more time, right?
Okay.
So when you get to pull from those experiences that you get all around the world and you get to have that experience in the you, then how does that serve me?
So
How does that serve me, David West, right? What does that do? How do you win?
it serves me because I get to share those experiences with others,
All right.
and I get to feel that positive karma back.
You
right?
get to feel that positive karma back. All right.
Exactly.
Is it important for you to feel that positive karma?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Did you see his face? And what did he
Well,
say?
maybe unfortunately as well, but yes.
Okay. So if today we can help you feel that positive karma, then is that a good reason for you to be invested in what we're doing here all day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. Yes.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Dave. Give him a hand, please. So I was following an interview sequence called Outcome Framing, where it's designed to help someone tap into what makes them say, yeah, absolutely. Right? And it's magic because it frames it as you've already gotten yourself here. You're here, so what's in this for you? And if you get that, what's in that for you? And if I ask him to fill this out online or in a basic interview, he would never say that what he lives for is getting positive karma from others. Right? You'd never say that, would you? So it's kind of embarrassing, huh? Yeah, I actually understand that stuff, and that's not shallow. So, but now, do I know something about what energizes him and what he's really in it for? And does he know I know? And does he know that I hold that dearly? Yeah. And now, do we have to be in competition over the rewards available in this team? Can he get that, and can I get what I'm here for as well? Right. Yeah. So what I've learned is that people have big fears about motivation in teams. Right? So our number one concern is that if we commit ourselves, that our investment won't be matched. Those other people won't match our investment. And then we have this freeloader effect, and that's not fair. So there's a principle of the least invested coworker. You might want to write this down. The principle of the least invested coworker. Oh, by the way, these are available on SlideShare. So just go to my SlideShare and look for there's a bunch of SlideShares on teamwork and team building. So here's the principle of the least invested coworker. And every team will perform to the level of the person who cares the least about what the team is doing. Every team will perform to the level of the person who cares the least about what the team is doing. So low motivation is infectious. Low motivation is a virus that 100% of the people on the team catch if anybody has it. And the reason is that it's unfair for us to take their load and do it for them. And it's unfair to put up with someone who's less interested. So unconsciously, we reduce our investment to that team, and we look to increase our investment to other areas of life where we can make an impact. So this is the second conversation I would start having with any team, because I want to know where the lowest level of motivation is on my team, and I want to see if I can do something about it. Right? And I want to help everyone else tap into the reward for them in being in this team this time. So, row number 2 on your assessment. Right. Team members understand and protect each other's interests and motivations. Give yourself an honest answer on your team. Team members understand and protect each other's interests and motivations. I would say if you don't have 5s on these first 2, my guess is your team is not very high performing. Right? And these are the 2 things that I would start focusing on big time. These 2 things are huge. And they're just conversations. So, are we on time? Comments, questions about motivation? Yes? Can you stand up and talk real loud? Oh, here's a mic.
Hi, so once you identify a team member that has a lower level of motivation, how do you address that person or those people?
Yeah, how do I?
Right.
I'll tell you how I do. I love them to death. All right. That's how I start. Right? I start by realizing they're a real person, and like the rest of us, they have a real life, and they have lots of problems, and they have lots of desires probably that aren't being met, right? Which means they're probably preoccupied. And so the first thing that I do is I get away from judging them or evaluating them as bad or wrong. Right? And the way that I do that is by honoring them as a human being that's just not checked in. Right? And then I ask myself, what conversation could I have with them to let them know that I care and I'm interested, and I'd love to find out if there ever could be anything in it for them to join in here. More often than not, what I find out is that nobody's ever asked them. And somebody coming and caring and asking them might be just what it takes. Might be. I'm not saying that it's always going to be magic and they're always going to become a sunshine flower immediately. But that's the first thing I would do to approach it. Right? Other things I would do is I might go transparent, right? And that is say, I notice that we're having a hard time getting your attention, and I demand your attention. And I'm wondering how I could do that, or why, or if there's something that we could do. So does that help you? Okay, good. So again, it's back to the share of, attention is the most scarce resource. Yeah, there's a famous CEO that's done a lot of work with Simon Sinek. If you remember, Simon Sinek wrote Start With Why. And there's a CEO that he's real fond of now that has he buys very mundane companies, garbage collection, chemical processing, not companies that do fascinating dev work, very mundane companies. He buys them all over the world and turns them around and transports this culture that he's created from one company to another. And it really is a culture of love, and it's a culture of caring. And he only replaces senior executives or anybody else in the organization who are truly, truly treasonous. Right? He keeps everybody in place. And if anybody in the organization ever shows any problematic behavior, right, even stealing, the first thing they do is check in and say, we're concerned about you and want to know if there's something going on with you or in your family or in your life that we can help with. It's the first move. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. Other questions or thoughts or comments about surfacing motivation?
So this may come across as cold, but do you assess how much time you need to invest in someone in order to motivate them properly, and whether they're worth that investment or not? Because last year at this same conference, I think the closing speaker made a comment of hey, identify negative people on the team and get rid of them, quickly.
Yeah.
So do you do that as some part of this process? And what if a lot of the motivation behind it is trust, deep-seated trust issues that cause it?
Yeah, sure. So even though I am a psychologist, I try not to practice psychology in, assessing others and what's wrong with them. So again, I would do this in conversation. But your first question was, do I ration the amount of time I'm willing to invest? You didn't say it that way, but yes, absolutely. And I will let them know. Right? So if someone is high maintenance on my team, sooner or later we'll have a question about our team operating with self-leadership and personal responsibility. If we can't do that, then how can I help you learn to do that? All right? And if that's not what you want, how can I help you find where you want to be? And for me, that's not a spreadsheet-like assessment of how many hours or how many days. For me, that's a feeling level of how quickly can I have these conversations with this person. So by quickly, what I mean is managing the relationship so the conversations we have are not unexpected, not surprises, not overly confronting, but make sense, right? So, hey, I demand to be on a great team. I know what it takes to build a team, right? It looks like you're not invested in this team. I'd love to know if there's a way we can get you invested. If not, is there someplace you'd rather be, right? How can I help? So absolutely. And my way of thinking, this idea of get rid of negative people, I think of it differently. Help people find the place they want to be where they can thrive. Yeah. Thank you. Is that useful? Okay. Others? Okay. So the third thing that I would do is something that's quite popular in the Agile community, and that is to have conversations about operating agreements. And for me, this is actually a step to building trust. Right? So a lot of people would say build trust. I say make and keep agreements. And the reason is that trust is the residue of promises kept. People making and keeping agreements demonstrates confidence in them and in each other, and being able to say what we're going to do and then do it. And the reason it's step number 3 is because as teams form, you go through this process that you've heard of, the Tuckman process of forming, storming, norming, and performing. And norming means that you figure out how you're going to work together. You figure out the generally unstated behavioral norms that are acceptable around here, how we're going to get things done. And there's 2 ways that norms develop in groups, and I'll tell you that in just a minute, but first let me ask you, how many of you work in places that have some really crummy norms? Have some very undesirable normative behavior that constantly shows up, and it's non-productive, it's dysfunctional, you don't like it, and you see it all the time over and over and over. Okay, good. So there's 2 ways that norms develop in groups. One is by default. And here's how norms develop by default. The behavior is tolerated and therefore repeated. Right. The behavior is tolerated and therefore repeated. And then it becomes a pattern. And the pattern is difficult to break then, hence norm. So every family has norms, every relationship has norms, every team has norms, every organization has norms. Society has norms. I'm trying to break norms in the responsibility process by pointing out that what society calls responsibility, in many cases I call shame and obligation. Right? And society calls it that because it's saying you're being a good person. You're doing what you're supposed to do and you're beating yourself up for making mistakes. So identify stuff that you are totally unwilling to tolerate in teammates and figure out how to have conversations early when it shows up. So that's one way to stop bad, dysfunctional behavior from happening by default. The other way that norms get developed is by design. I call them designer norms. And I want you to be in the business of creating designer norms. And the way you get designer norms is by making agreements about important behavior. So if you've never really understood exactly why you're participating in creating operating agreements and putting the paper on the wall that nobody looks at or pays attention to or does anything about, the creation of the agreements is just the first negotiation. That's just the first step in understanding how we want to behave with each other in this team. After that, it's your job to monitor them, to not tolerate violations from them, to have conversations about whether we really agree to this or not if they've been violated. It's your job to demonstrate them and acknowledge other people when demonstrating them. So what this says is consider norms like meeting frequency, procedures and roles, workload distribution, communication policies, problem-solving policies, conflict resolution, etc. And you know the rule of 7 plus or minus 2, so that there shouldn't be so many agreements that you can't remember them. They should be a few mightily important agreements about how we operate with each other. And they shouldn't just be adopted from somebody from somewhere else. They should actually be a conversation that you create with your team. By the way, when I participate in these, there's only one thing that I usually ask for, and that is, are we willing to do our best to operate from responsibility, knowing full well shit's going to go wrong? Right? And that we're all going to go down to here and nothing real happens until somebody pulls us back up? Right? So if you're ever on a team with me, that'll be my one agreement. Row number 3, team agreements. Team members uphold team agreements. So where is your team on actually having some shared agreements and monitoring them and paying attention to them? If you have a bunch of unsatisfactory norms, you're probably a 1. And my guess is here is if you rate really highly on these first 3, you're knocking it out of the park as a team. So anybody here have high scores on these first 3 rows, and you can also attest to being on a team that's really in flow and really making it happen? Shoot. Well, I will. Dave, back there. Good. All right. Nice. So let me ask you this. Do these sound like impossible things to do? Who can do it? Who has permission to have these conversations? Everyone. Yeah. In my experience, these top 3 are 95%. That if I see a high-performance team, I can check off these first 3, that they're happening. And if I don't see a high-performance team, if I'll have these 3 conversations with them to completion of these first 3 conversations, then they are going to get into gear. So it's really quite cool. So after that, then the next thing that I would do is, so again, I think of team building as if the luxury of time. Right? So I don't believe that team building is separate from work. I believe that team building is part of work, and it's the certain conversations that we have that gives teams the best chance to cohesion, to come together as a team. So the 4th thing that I would do is I would start looking for the team to discover their own clear and elevating goal. And a clear and elevating goal is a particular type of goal. Right, so most of us have written goals or stated goals of some type that are not doing their job. So how many of you have some goals that you're not paying attention to, not working on, that are not very inspiring, that aren't capturing a share of your attention? Are you willing to admit it? How many of us have some of those? How many of us actually wrote those? So not a few admitting, right? So my definition of a goal or operationalization of a goal is this. The purpose of a goal is to put me in motion. The purpose of a goal is to put me in motion. So more of an engineering definition of a goal has to do with the outcome, that the goal is a statement of an end state. Psychologically, the purpose of a goal is to do what? So if I have goals and they're not putting me in motion, then they're not doing their job. So I spent some time studying goals and appropriate goals. I've done some work. I write about the characteristics of good goals in this book. So good goals have 4 characteristics. Let me see if I can remember them. Number 1, they clarify intention. So intention is one of your keys to responsibility, knowing what you intend, knowing what you want, knowing what you desire and expect to come about, intention. So number 1, good goals clarify intention. Number 2, they focus attention. So intention and attention are sisters. So I can give you a crass definition of that. If you really, really, really have to go to the bathroom, so you have an intention to find a bathroom, what's your attention on? Your attention is on finding the bathroom, yes? And getting there and asking directions. Right? So we have the power of intention, we have the power of attention or awareness or focus, and they're sisters. So when you clarify intention, it focuses attention. So that's number 2. Number 3 is good goals remove obligation. Remember obligation from the responsibility process? That's that feeling trapped or burdened state. I'll come back to that in a moment. And number 4 is they generate energy. Good goals generate energy. Right. So you're going to get some good positive karma today, aren't you?
I hope so.
Yeah. Right. Goal, generate energy. So back to obligation. So this research has taught me to no longer believe in procrastination as a character trait or a personality disorder. I see procrastination as simply the result of a bad goal. Procrastination is being an obligation about something you think you should do. So how many of you find yourself procrastinating and beat yourself up for procrastinating? Come on, tell me the truth. I know the answer. Yeah, so we think there's something wrong with us, and then we shame ourselves for there being something wrong with us. And what I'm here to tell you is there's nothing wrong with you. The reason you procrastinated is because you really didn't want to do it. But you had to, so you finally got focused at the last moment. So I can help you with that by helping you change the way you choose what you want to do in your life. So clear and elevating goals, this comes from scientific research on high-performing teams from a book called Teamwork, What Must Go Right, What Can Go Wrong. The book's many years ago by authors Larson and LaFausto. They were a couple of professors from the University of Denver. And they said a clear and elevating goal always appears in the big, well-publicized teams. And a clear and elevating goal is defined this way. Clear means no measurement needed. So instead of saying, okay, what metrics are we going to use to decide whether or not we achieved this goal? Right? If you have a really clear goal, you don't need any metrics. It's a 0 or a 1. You either did it or you didn't. Right? So think about the moonshot. 1963, Kennedy said, by the end of the decade, we're going to land a man safely on the moon. We're going to land a man on the moon and bring him home safely. So was that clear? So here was somebody who stated something publicly that everybody in the world would get to assess whether or not that goal was achieved. Right? So a clear goal is when the team takes their task and they figure out how to change it into something that's really meaningful to them, and no measurements are needed. Elevated then goes with that. What elevating means is it creates a sense of discovery. There's a gap between what we know how to do and what we say we're going to do, right? Which means it creates some positive anxiousness about doing it. It grabs attention. It's worth investing oneself in. And so I say I'd start looking for that. And the reason is that there's no recipe for writing a clear and elevating goal. There's no formula for it. If I knew of one, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be on my island in the Caribbean, right? Because I would have made billions from teaching smart people how to write perfect goals. So there is no recipe, no formula for writing a clear and elevating goal. It's something that's discovered. And for most people, it's discovered out of conflict. Either internal conflict, wrestling with ourselves inside about what we really want, what we really care about, what we really value, what we really believe in, and something emerging. Or in the case of teams, it comes from storming. Remember, forming, storming, norming, and performing? So what I've found in my, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of teams that I've supported, what I realize is that when a true, clear, and elevating goal is discovered, it's usually discovered well into the team's work together. And it emerges out of the storming. And so as a teammate, as a team member, as a team coach, I'm going to be listening for the emergence of something that the team could craft into a clear and elevating goal. And the clear and elevating goal is usually qualitatively different than the statement of the task. So one of the patterns, I'm not going to call it a mistake, one of the patterns that managers make is we take a task and when we set a goal, we simply quantify it. Right? Well, let's improve performance. Well, how much? 28.7% in 6 months. Right? So isn't that what we normally do when we set goals? Clear and elevating goals are usually a qualitatively different statement. Let me give you an example. I worked with a large cross-functional team at Motorola that was working hard to save a multi-hundred-million-dollar business with chips with Ford. And this has been published, so I'm not talking out of school. They were in trouble, and Ford was threatening to fire them and hire one of their competitors. So it would be a market share swap from hundreds of millions of dollars down to AMD or somebody or Intel getting that contract. So this got their attention. And they had a big, long customer focus thing. And one of the sub-teams was the barcode sub-team. And the barcode sub-team was tasked with ironing out all the inventory and distribution and warehouse issues between Motorola and Ford. That was literally the statement of the task. Iron out all of the delivery and inventory and warehouse issues between Motorola and Ford. Honest answer here, how many of you live to iron? Anybody live to iron out problems, iron out stuff? Anybody? Right. So lots of times we have tasks that are inherently unmotivating. And that was a stellar example of one. And 2 months into this, at their monthly 8-hour meeting of the entire big team, and they had 13 sub-teams working on this, the leader of the barcode sub-team stood up and took 5 minutes, and she said, I just want to let everybody know that we have rechartered ourselves. And she put a slide up, and she said, here's our new charter. Motorola will never, ever allow a Ford line to be shut down anywhere in the world for lack of parts. Task, iron out all the logistical and warehouse issues. Goal, never allow our customers' assembly line to be shut down for lack of parts. Is that clear? Yeah. It was so clear that she felt permission to spend money not in her budget, not in her signing authority, to hire a charter jet to fly a little box of chips to Madrid, Spain, to a plant that was about to run out of them. And she didn't have the signing authority to hire this charter jet, but she knew that the president of the fab had her back and that he believed in the goal. But then she was scared enough that she called their normal transport airline and said, if you don't figure out a way to get this box of chips on your plane to Madrid, I'm sending you the bill for the charter jet. Now, when you are motivated by a good goal, like Motorola will never ever allow a Ford line to be shut down anywhere in the world for lack of parts, do you have the chutzpah to do things like spend money that you're not authorized to do because you know the boss supports it? And if you just are doing a task that says iron out all the issues, would you care about whether or not a box of chips got to Madrid? No. So be on the lookout for clear and elevating goals, and know that they're most often discovered and not created or written. So assess yourself on number 4. A clear and elevating goal focuses, energizes, and gives meaning to your work. This also teaches something to me, and that is that the folklore on teams and team building teaches us to write goals early in our team building process. And what I've learned is I don't need to do that. All I need to do is to get people in agreement on what they're a team to do. That's all I need to do to start with. No highfalutin mission statement or purpose statement or vision or goal, just an agreement on why we're a team, shared clarity. And then let the goal emerge. So number 4, or number 5, let's move on, is to discover what people bring. And I think that Agile has been talking about this a lot. And I would probably start doing this before number 4, and maybe even before number 3, and maybe as part of number 2 today. And so I'm not going to go deep into this, but instead start bringing this to a close. So I have, first of all, these 5 conversations are written into this book, Teamwork as an Individual Skill, but I rewrote them very clearly more recently in an executive report called The 5 Flawless Steps to Building a Strong Executive Leadership Team. And this is about a 50-page PDF that took 8 blogs that I wrote for Rally Software. So Rally used my guidance to build their leadership and culture, if you're familiar with Rally pre-Computer Associates days. And so this has commentary from Ryan Martins, Rally's founder, and others about what this meant to them. So you can get this report at ChristopherAvery.com/flawless and enter into winning a book today. What I'll do is email the winners, and I'll also post on social media, Facebook and Twitter, that. And I want to use the last 5 minutes or so to hear from you. So questions, comments, your own stories. What's on your mind? Thank you.
How to motivate when you do routine expectations, tact and diplomacy.
Tact and diplomacy. So what he says is he has an idea for my next book, and that is tact and diplomacy when I do team motivations.
Right, because you're entering into a situation where you've got to instruct or guide or mentor someone, and some people take it okay and some don't.
Oh.
I would think, right? So that's a challenge.
Yeah, I actually don't share that belief, Bill. No, your belief that many people don't take that well. In my experience, it has more to do with my sincerity. So tact and belief, maybe my word for that would be sincerity. All right? So if I try and surface motivation only because it's a technique to try and manipulate somebody, then I would expect them to be resistant. But if I do it because I sincerely believe and honor them as a human being, and I want to relate to them on this team and connect, then I find the resistance isn't there. That's my experience. Yeah. So I think we often approach other people with an unconscious attitude that something's wrong with them and we need to fix them. And I just don't have that. Yeah. And they smell that. They smell that and their resistance goes up. Right. Other thoughts, comments, questions? All right, go and have a brilliant conference. I'll be around all day. And so find me or figure out a way to contact me if you want to meet. And I'd love to chat about your situation. Thank you so much.